just trying and putting yourself out there, exposing yourself, getting the practice in, getting the reps in, that will also make you more confident with your ability to challenge yourself and push yourself. And so though it won't become physically easier, it'll become mentally easier, and there won't be an obstacle or a hurdle to overcome next time you need to push yourself.
Welcome to the Wits and Weights podcast. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this twice-a-week podcast is dedicated to helping you achieve physical self-mastery by getting stronger, optimizing your nutrition, and upgrading your body composition. We'll uncover science-backed strategies for movement, metabolism, muscle, and mindset with a skeptical eye on the fitness industry so you can look and feel your absolute best. Let's dive right in. Wits and Weights community, welcome to another episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Adam Poehlmann, host of the Poehlmann Fitness Show and a dedicated health, fitness, and nutrition coach at Poehlmann Fitness. Adam's approach is all about what we like here, and that is personalized, sustainable fitness plans that address the body, mind, and spirit. His journey is rooted in his belief that health goes beyond just losing body fat and building muscle. He helps gym goers transform their bodies through practical, evidence-based coaching without strict dieting. And I invited Adam on the show today to discuss the importance of mindset and maintaining an inner locus of control. Despite the loud, obnoxious, and contradictory noise of the fitness industry, we're going to explore having a growth mindset, strategies for overcoming mental barriers, and how to manage your mental and informational diet for a practical, productive approach to life. If you're struggling with motivation, if you're hitting mental roadblocks, if your head is keeping your body from doing and getting what it wants and needs, Adam's going to help you out today. Adam has been training and coaching for 10 years. He currently serves all of his clients online. And when he's not training or coaching, Adam enjoys pursuing his faith, hunting, and spending time checking out any new coffee shop he can. Adam, his wife, and pup reside in Fort Worth, Texas. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. That was a solid intro. Not your first rodeo.
I don't know if you saw the video I sent earlier, but there we go. Yeah, no, I was joking because on our IG chat, just for the listener, I have this silly video I compiled like a year ago with a bunch of people praising the intros, and I'm like, should I send this to people? It's one of those kind of like vanity things, but
sure,
it's pretty funny. So, all right. So, you talk a lot about the mindset and about how the key to transforming your body lies in mastering your mind. And it's something we give a lot of, I'll say, lip service to, and there's like this woo factor to it for a lot of people. But in reality, a lot of people are absorbing tons of information, and a lot of it maybe is good information, and they're just not applying it. They're not implementing it for some reason. So for people who are stuck, they're frustrated, what's the very first mental shift that you'd encourage them to make right now, listening to this show?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in general, one of the first mental shifts I would encourage people to make is accepting that their health is solely their responsibility. And they are the only ones that are in control of their actions and behaviors. Yes, we can't control outcomes in life, but we can control, how we respond, how we behave, what we act on, so on and so forth. So I would say first and foremost, accept responsibility. And as you alluded to earlier, maintain an internal locus of control. Essentially, the idea that I am in control of what I do or don't do. I happen to my environment, or I respond to my environment versus life happening to me. So that's essentially the first thing that I would say. Once you accept that, then it is far easier to move into perhaps the practical and the tactical of what it looks like to actually apply that belief. But if you go straight into it without the belief or the mindset or the acceptance of that responsibility, it's far easier to go astray, not do what you want to do, not do what you say you want to do, so on and so forth. So the radical acceptance, in my opinion, is the first step.
Okay, love that. So radical acceptance, personal responsibility, self-efficacy even, which
yes.
I get from that. So how does somebody become aware of that in the first place in a concrete way? And I can think of like statements that we make to ourselves, but just if it's a really simple thing where somebody's like, oh, that's maybe the reason why I'm not going to the gym, or, is it a statement that they're making? Is it something people can apply right now and say, I'm doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think of is, and by no means am I a mindset expert or have a wealth of knowledge on this, but it's just something I've becoming more obsessed with lately. And I think of the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, and she really kind of popularized the fixed mindset versus growth mindset piece. And in that book, she goes through some different things that you can use to identify. But essentially, we're not always fixed mindset. We're not always growth mindset. There are certain areas of our lives where we might have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So obviously, recognizing what you say or think about who you are, what you can do is one of the best things. However, sometimes that self-awareness isn't there, or it's just become such a habit that we don't quite recognize it, right? And so one of the things that I've found to be the most beneficial for me is going to my wife and asking her like, hey, where do you notice me having maybe a fixed mindset or having a negative attitude or some cynicism towards something? And she will say, she'll bring certain things up. Oh, I noticed this or I noticed that. And most of the time I'm like, yeah, for sure. I don't disagree at all. I recognize that. And then sometimes she'll bring one up and it causes me to pause and think, oh, shoot, you're right. I hadn't realized that up to this point. I was telling myself that I couldn't do something or that something was too hard or whatever. And so having that perspective from somebody else who's not always in your own mind is extremely helpful in first understanding where you might have that fixed mindset and how you can improve that.
That must be really good for your relationship as well, because that's being vulnerable right there. It's something that as soon as you said it, I realized, oh, even I can do that more often with my wife. I probably ask friends and clients and everything more to give me feedback than my own loved ones who really know me the best.
100%. And the thing is too, with it really depends on who you go to and what the relationship is like that you have. Like I have friends in my life where I won't go to them for those things because it's that type of friendship where we're vulnerable in some sense, but I know that they're not going to just have a come to Jesus moment with me. They're more so looking out for just my feelings, which has its place. But then there are other friends and my wife as well, people in my life where it's like, I know that they're going to tell me the truth in love, even if it's something that doesn't sound good or I don't want to hear. So yeah, in those scenarios, it's very beneficial to go to those people where you're like, you know what? They might not say the nicest thing or say it in the way that I want to hear it, but they are going to tell me the truth. And the truth is what I need.
Yeah. And that's the art of asking for feedback. I mean, if you don't ask for it and you just hope to get it, even when someone does give you feedback, it might not be what type of feedback you're looking for. Like you
100%.
kind of alluded to.
Yep.
Just something you said earlier, kind of jokingly, I'm not an expert, I'm obsessed. I don't know if you just threw that out there, if you've said that before, but that's really a profound statement. I want to glom onto that a little bit because I feel like people who are obsessed with things in this positive way, they are the experts. Like, I feel like there are too many proclaimed experts and people who are well book read or something. Like even me on this podcast, I had imposter syndrome for the longest time, but it's like, I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I want to learn as much as possible. Somebody asked me a question, I don't know the answer. I'm going to go figure it out. And that does make you the expert. So I just want to say that just in case you had any doubts about that. You are an expert, but it's because you're obsessed. So
that's actually a perfect example of what we were just talking about. That's a great reminder because as you were just reflecting on that, I was thinking to myself, why did I feel the need to say that? And I think if I'm being 100% honest with you, there are, in the realm of being vulnerable, I think there are some potential insecurities or things on my mind about a lack of formal education. Especially nowadays, we like to praise people who have master's degrees and PhDs as if they are the people who know everything all the time. Especially, I mean, social media reeks of that.
MDs.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we have a lot of, credential fallacy where essentially if they have credentials, it means they know everything and they always know what's best, which absolutely they have knowledge and expertise that sometimes goes beyond what I know, but that doesn't mean they know it all. Anyway, so I feel a lot of that pressure from social media. And maybe right there is an example of an area of my life where I have maybe a little bit more of a fixed mindset. Don't consider myself an expert on something, but rather a lay person who is just obsessed. So that was a quality example of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, it was totally planned out. This was 100% scripted to get to that moment.
Exactly.
No, it's pretty cool. Like I love doing podcasts just and talking to people like this because we do have those different perspectives and we're opening up, and anybody, again, people who are listening to this, like that is the point of this conversation today, is finding out how you can really dig deeper into that. And hopefully we've inspired you that like us expert coaches here, we have things that we need to unravel about ourselves and a third party that may see you better than yourself in one little area or another, even a stranger, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So going to the inner locus of control, then we talked about responsibility and self-efficacy. We want to kind of shift that eventually into practicality, right? Practical actions. And I guess that's a matter of how do we strengthen that locus of control, right? Because number one is acknowledging and having awareness. But then number two is, okay, how do we really make the most of that? Where do we want to jump from there, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, we can go anywhere, but just straight diving into practical tips. One thing I will say before I think of a few that have really helped me is I think this is a part of, I don't want to say self-mastery because we're never going to master ourselves. We can't be perfect, but I think this is an element of self-growth and self-improvement with the internal locus of control. It's ultimately figuring out, again, where those areas you do have that and what areas you don't. So in terms of practical tips, one thing that really, really helps me is understanding that I have done something just as difficult, if not more difficult, before. So that's a great way to give yourself that self-belief and confidence that you can go ahead and do something. Or at the very worst, you can give a crazy amount of effort. Perfect example is I did my first Murph on Memorial Day. There are so many years where one of my friends is just texting, all the guys in the group chat, who's doing their Murph, who's doing their Murph. And I hate to say it, but I was that guy that's like, look, it doesn't align with the program I'm running right now. So I didn't do it.
It's going to interfere with my recovery.
Oh gosh, yeah, seriously. And this year I just had like an instant conviction where it's like, I am avoiding this because it brings me outside of my comfort zone. Even though I would say when I train very hard and I'm uncomfortable. I have a level of discomfort. This is different. It's something I'm not used to. I haven't built that confidence there. And so anyway, I decided to do this Murph and I'm going at it and I'm laughing at myself because my gym only has an 8-pound vest. I think you're supposed to do it with maybe like a 10 to 25 pound vest, to my understanding. I didn't look into it until before this year. And so I'm dying. I've got this 8-pound vest on and I am dying. And I'm like, okay, do I laugh at myself right now? Or do I like motivate myself? What do I do here? Because I'm 3/4 of the way through and I'm dwindling quick. So I catch myself thinking in that moment, I went back to my college baseball days where we had the most disgusting amount of conditioning I've ever seen any sports team have in my entire life. But it was just for the pitchers. In that moment, I really wished I was a different position. And we were doing the craziest things. And I thought, you know what? Yes, it's been a few years. Yes, it's been some time since I pushed myself in that way, but I have the mental capability to get myself into that mode and keep going. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to go faster, but I have the confidence that I don't need to quit and that I can finish this because I've done something like that before. So that's one thing that I find very helpful when it comes to maintaining an internal locus of control. And then I would also say another practical one that comes to mind is visualization. Going back to college, when I was playing baseball, there are a lot of stories coming up here, but I don't know if you've ever heard of it or listeners have ever heard of it, but it's this psychological phenomenon called the yips, basically. And you see it a lot in golf. You see it a lot in catchers in baseball. Sometimes you see it in basketball with free throws. But it's basically you'll see it a lot in sports or endeavors or aspects of sports.
Was that mentioned in one of the gymnasts, the U.S. gymnast? What's her name? Was that the same phenomenon she had,
yes.
Or was that something else?
Yes. Yeah. I think in the gymnastics world, they call it the spinnies or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. It was a different term, but I get it. I get it.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Something that you have mastered so well. But for some reason or another, you start to doubt yourself and you start to psych yourself out. And something that is seemingly so easy becomes so difficult. So for a catcher, throwing the ball back to a pitcher, he'll throw it 20 feet over his head or 10 feet left or straight into the ground because he's so, in his head. And for me, that happened when I was in college. Playing catch from anywhere from 10 to 90 feet was extremely challenging, not physically, but mentally. But once I got to a certain distance when we were warming up and playing catch, it wasn't a problem because once we're at 120 feet plus, I had to just rip it, and when you're just letting it rip, you don't have to think about it. So long story short, I end up working with this sports psychologist and we go through a lot of visualization techniques. And that was a season in my life where I realized how profound visualization was. And I was able to apply that into my workouts later on when baseball was over and I got into fitness. And I realized the power that it had and improvement in my performance, even just thinking about the workout that I had going into the gym. I kind of walked myself mentally through like, all right, what's that first exercise going to feel like? How am I going to think about performing the movement? How am I going to think about, contracting my muscles? Or what am I thinking about during my rest periods? Just having a quick visual walkthrough drastically improved, not just the quality of the workout and my performance, but also my enjoyment with it as well. And I guess that kind of brings us into another practical tip before I stop rambling here is having a plan helps so much, especially working out, because without a plan, it's really hard to visualize what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and how you're going to feel and what's going to happen if roadblocks and obstacles come. But if you have a plan, you can walk yourself through that process as opposed to simply winging it. So those are a few practical tips that I would say can be very profound.
And I think they're all interconnected in a profound way. In fact, so I'm a huge fan of science fiction. I'm reading a story now where they He talked about the evolution of humans, and one of the things that made us distinct and also allowed us to have a big brain was our ability to imagine the future. What you're talking about is like this continuum of here's what we've done in the past, we've overcome it, here's what I'm thinking about my performance coming up, and I have a plan to execute. It's all related to that idea of like, let's put ourselves in that identity of, and that time continuum, right? That just gets better and better over time. And I know you said like, we'll never get there with mastery. And I know what you mean is like, we strive for those things. We'll never get there. And that's maybe empowering because the rest of our lives, we can get better and better and better till the day we croak. You had a recent Instagram post, actually, to segue from visualization. You talked about mental contrasting as a technique. And I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, where it's not just visualization, I think, but there's another piece of that that might even enhance the visualization. You want to chat about that?
Yeah, I'll have to try to remember exactly what the...
I have it all written out on my notes if you need if you need a reminder.
Yeah, give me a little reminder. Give me a little insight there.
Okay, yeah. You said visualization's powerful, but what it often lacks is challenges to overcome.
Roadblocks, yes.
There you go.
I got it now. Thank you.
Good, cool.
So what we often tend to do is we idealize things, right? We idealize our lives. We put our dreams and aspirations and plans up on this pedestal, especially when it comes to fat loss. You know, whenever we're pursuing any fitness goal, not even fat loss, but losing body fat, building muscle, building strength, changing your nutrition, we tend to project this unrealistic expectation of what the process will be like. So we only visualize ourselves going through this seamless, easy, perfect process, all the while knowing full well that that's not how life works. So one thing that can help is, as we're going through this visualization, is thinking through, okay, how am I going to respond, act, and behave if a roadblock comes, if a speed bump comes, if a major obstacle or life event comes, then what will I do? And I think from there, that really provides a great segue into implementation intentions. And this is, I would say, this is the in-between of the, if you were to have the mindset or mental visualization piece on one end of the spectrum, and then you have the actual action on the other end, I would say the implementation intention is kind of in the middle. So a very simple, example that we could use there is, it's basically if then. So if something happens, then I will blank. But specifically with the mental contrasting, what we could say is, if I'm on the way home from work and I don't want to go to the gym, then I will blank. Then I will call my friends so they can hold me accountable. Then I will drive to the parking lot in front of the gym and sit there. Then I will, at the very least, walk into the gym doors. Then I will, at the very least, do my first exercise. And if I want to leave after that, then I leave. Something like that. That way we have a plan beforehand for when those obstacles and those challenges come up. The worst things that we can do is just dream about it and then not do anything and not have a backup plan, because we don't do well with a lot of decision making. We can develop a lot of decision fatigue. So one of the best things that we can do in our health and fitness is eliminate the need for decisions. You've even seen little quirky traits like this in entrepreneurs, CEOs. Some of them just wear the same clothes. It's like, hey, that's one less decision I have to make. And you might not want to be that drastic, but the principle still applies. So, if I don't have to make a decision and, work my brain of like, am I going to go to the gym? Am I not? Am I going to do this? Am I not? What am I going to have for lunch? Nothing is made. You are going to set yourself up for success because you don't have to think about it. You just have a plan, and even a plan to overcome those mental roadblocks. So that's kind of speaking into the mental contrasting a little bit. You're just taking the visualization and the dreaming and applying a plan for when things just don't go your way.
Yeah. And you're imagining the roadblocks rather than like, it's taking it one step further than just saying, well, I know I'm going to a restaurant on Saturday, therefore that's going to be a roadblock. It's more of like creating out of thin air the roadblocks that all can occur and then coming up with forks from those, knowing they're going to happen. Like, that's life.
Yep.
Life is full of those.
Yeah. I go to the restaurant, and it's not just that I'm going to the restaurant, but I'm going to the Mexican restaurant, and they have the saltiest chips and they're the best things in the world. And I tend to have 2 baskets just on my own.
They're so good, Adam. They're so good, man.
They're so good. And my friend Joey he's going to be there. And he's always the one that's pressuring me to have a beer when I just don't want to have one. And then they have Tres Leches cake, which is one of my favorites. And so you kind of have to walk yourself through that beforehand. And someone even listening right now might be thinking, man, that sounds like a lot of thought. It's like, sure, as I'm, rambling through it in the moment, it does sound like a lot. But imagine how hard it is to make those decisions when you're in the moment and you have the stimulation of the conversation. It's last minute, so you feel extra pressure. You don't have a plan. It'll be 10 times harder then. than it will here for 10 to 30 seconds figuring out what you want to do before that event comes.
Yeah. Yeah. Something came to mind when you said that. A friend of mine, he has a podcast. He just renamed it. What is it? Mental Muscle Up Podcast. And he quoted someone else, and I don't remember who he quoted that, where he said, the cost of thinking about something and doing something are usually the same. And it was being used in the positive sense of like, stop thinking and go do, but you could flip it around here with what you're saying in that the cost of doing something in the moment, you could just displace that with the cost of thinking about it ahead of time. Meaning it's like you said, it's no worse for you. And it's actually gonna be a lot better because it takes out that fatigue at the worst time, especially if you got a couple Dos Equis in you, right?
100%. Yeah.
In the Mexican restaurant.
Yeah. Once you're a little bit of your inhibition is there, you're screwed.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because alcohol has been coming up a lot lately. I don't know. You know how certain things, when you just notice them, you just all of a sudden notice it a lot in the fitness space, in the industry, on threads, everywhere. I'm seeing alcohol all the time. Are you seeing that right now? Like,
absolutely.
For some reason? Yeah.
I think I'm seeing it in fitness and outside of it. I feel like there is I don't keep up with like market trends or anything like that. It's just more so I've noticed dry bars everywhere.
Yeah.
And
I've the noticed NA movement. Yeah.
I've noticed so many people maybe not abstaining, but just really understanding that, this habit of mine has way more cons that drastically affect my life than it does pros. And I'm not too surprised, to be honest with you, Philip, because this is something that I've seen in coaching for 10 years. I will always have a conversation with my clients about like, hey, what kind of food choices are we making for sure? And do they align with our goals? And if they don't, are we, is it sensible? Are we going to enjoy it? Is it worth it? Whatever, yada, yada. But not once in 10 years have I had a conversation that includes explicitly eliminating or forbidding something, even alcohol. And what I've found is that more and more people, as they pursue their health, just realize that they don't want it anymore, or at least don't want it that frequently, or don't want the second one, or want to save it for moments where it's actually worth it instead of just making it a regular thing. They don't feel the quote unquote need to wind down with those 2 extra hefty glasses of wine every single night, whatever it is, And so I'm not surprised in the slightest. It reminds me of, you mentioned the Stoicism earlier, and I'm a Christian. So it reminds me of what we kind of see in the Christian faith in the scriptures that, a lot of people say, okay, once you accept Jesus, how does that work? Like you just accept Jesus and then you're good to go. And like, you can just keep being an a-hole and you're set. Like, it's like, no. What happens is like, once you accept Jesus, the Holy Spirit like starts doing a work inside of you, and you no longer want to do the things that you used to do, treat people the way that you used to treat them. And a very similar thing happens with fitness, I would argue. It's not so much about learning to hate something else, but the more you love working out, the more you fall in love with how you feel, the more you enjoy the benefits it gives you when you play with your kids, and how you feel in the morning when you wake up after you had a great meal the night before, the less you want to have the extra drink or go to happy hour that third time that week. And I feel like for the people who are getting into fitness in this day and age, that's one of the things that they're noticing the most.
Yeah. And it's in its own space. Like alcohol, you can't just lump it in with all food, right? Because it's not this source of nourishment or fuel in any sense, right? Like it just has negatives.
No.
So to try to rationalize it by lumping it in there, it's more like a behavior. It's more like a separate little thing that you're doing. It'd be almost like taking a behavior you have in your life, not related to fitness, that is just not serving you in any way.
Totally.
And then rationalizing that I'm doing it because it's a good social experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We tend to do that with alcohol.
And I think it's taken so long too, because it's so normalized, going to happy hour, having a drink after every outing or at every outing is so normal. I even think of people still my age, 30, having weekend, benders, and they're like, it's a normal thing for them. And I'm like, what are you doing with your life? But honestly, it's just normal,
Yeah, so, they brag about it and it's like, oh yeah.
Totally. But I've noticed even more so that people are now like saying, hey, my family is, they look at me weird if I don't want to drink, or my friends look at me weird. But then I've also noticed that the more they pursue that, the less they notice that. Like, oh yeah, it's a normal thing now. Actually, it inspired so-and-so to stop having alcohol. And people are almost kind of like being enlightened, where like the blinders are coming off and they're like, I guess you're right. That never really serves me that much. I enjoy the taste of it here and there, no doubt. But like, why do I spend $15 on a drink every time I go out to eat? Even though I know I'm not going to sleep well. And then I wake up, I guess it is normal for me just to have a water or a Diet Coke and call it good. Yeah. So then more people do it.
Yeah. No, fair point. And then all the other things, why am I getting more belly fat, and why, Can I not sleep? And on and on and on.
Right.
It goes with that. So, and I guess when you talk about being stigmatized or was stigmatized, but now you can be an inspiration for people. I mean, I think that principle is the same with a lot of what we do. That's good for us. I'll say, I don't always use the word good and bad, but you know what I mean? It serves us that we're weird. We're outliers. Like even what we do here still is the percentage of people. Like, I don't know if you'd agree with that, but like even going after mastery or personal growth just seems to be the smallest of minorities, which almost encourages me that I want to be doing that. It must be the right thing and hopefully
Absolutely.
inspire more people to do that.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's definitely a ripple effect that people notice there. And I think not to go too far into the other, I guess piece of mindset and people just feeling stuck in their lives, but I think so many people feel that way because they don't have an example of what it looks like to not be stuck. Not having alcohol might be a small version of that, but maybe there's a broader example of leaving their job and starting a career or being more present with their family. Or I think of men in general, men not growing up with an example of what it looks like to be vulnerable, and so we've got a newer couple in our city group at church, and like he's completely foreign to that. In the last year that he's been with us, he like has been so blessed by seeing other guys just be real about where they're at. And so whoever's listening, whatever that small thing is that right now might not be the normal, it's probably spinning some wheels for somebody in their head and making them consider living their life differently for the better. So keep doing it.
Yeah. Good point. So speaking of that hitting a wall, then just to learn a little bit more about you, can you tell us about a time where, you hit a wall in your fitness journey in particular and had to mentally navigate that? Maybe it's recent, maybe it's a long time ago, but something where you maybe drew one of these deeper, wise lessons that you're sharing with us today.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, honestly, I'm in one right now. If I would say I'm in one, if you compare where I'm at now to previous years, when I first got into fitness, I was in the middle of like, not to be too dramatic, but like an identity crisis type of thing. Like I wanted to be a professional baseball player my whole life. I spent every waking thought and breath and everything I possibly could on baseball. And then once that was over, I was like, what am I doing here? Like, what's my existence? And so my dad used to be a bodybuilder, and that's how I kind of got into fitness. He brought me to the gym to distract me essentially and keep me from being a total bummer. And I fell in love with that, because it was like, oh, I'm putting this work in and I see change and this is really cool. And then I was in college at the time as well. And so long story short, I saw another trainer and thought, that seems like a pretty cool job. And I can be flexible with hours with college and I can, make my way through that. And so I did that. And at that time, you have your typical young guy stuff. I'm not dating anybody. I want to get attention. I want to be married at some point. Where do I start? Try to be hot, right? What's going to help? Muscles. So you get into that. And then that drives you and drives you and drives you. You start getting bigger. So you get driven even more. And then eventually you kind of grow up a little bit. And it's not that to be grown up or mature, you don't care about those muscles anymore, but it's just your priorities start to change over time. And for me right now, like I'm in more of a wall or a rut in the sense that I'm just getting my workout in to say that I did it and to say that, or to keep myself from getting fat, essentially. I'm just doing the bare minimum, So what I've been using is anything from extreme cheese, like really cheesy stuff, to stuff that's a little bit more profound. And, I don't know right now if I'm on a trajectory to get to a spot where I feel driven all the time to go to the gym and feel all about it. And because I'm not sure if that exists all the time. But one thing that I do it's so cheesy, Philip, but there's this playlist on, oh my gosh, I'm like embarrassed to say it, but there's this playlist on Spotify called Machiavelli Motivation. And it basically takes like audio from motivational speakers, Tony Robbins, David Goggins, all that stuff, and puts dramatic like score music with it. And if you were to play it in front of your friends in a car, you'd be like, I'm embarrassed for myself. But when you're in the gym, you're going to move mountains. It's like the best thing in the world. So there's something little like that that helps me kind of stir up that mental capability of like, okay, I can do this. This is good for me. I want to do this. And then there's other stuff like visualizing or maybe even some mental contrasting of like, how am I going to feel if I don't pursue this? How am I going to feel if I give up on the gym? How am I going to feel if I, just call it good with 2 workouts this week, even though I plan to do 4? I'm not going to be proud of myself. I'm not going to feel good. I'm going to feel better if I do it. And that doesn't make me gung-ho motivated, want to do it, but it definitely gets me to the gym and I get it done. So those are some things that I've been doing right now. And I do that same thing I talked about earlier. I'll think about what I'm going to do in the gym, what exercise I'm going to start with, kind of run myself through how's my body feeling in this current moment? How will I want to warm up because of that? What are some things I need to watch out for? And then I walk myself through that workout, and then I'm better able to go in there and feel as if I have done this before. And that helps so much. So those aren't anything like, they're not profound, but that's what I'm doing right now.
I mean, some people listening are probably maybe not doing anything, right? And they're sitting on their couch or whatever. And hopefully everybody listening to this podcast, they're totally jacked. They've got it all dialed in. They're 95% consistent. But I mean, the reality is everybody, including people who are proclaimed or not proclaimed experts, and even they're obsessed with this and they teach people this thing. We all have our struggles. And I don't know, you may have had something coming up in your life that caused another thing to be the priority, or you lost motivation because whatever drove you before didn't drive you anymore. And you're sharing these tools in the toolbox. Like there's some external motivation, there's the music, there's the visual contrasting, which is great because now you're imagining how much it would suck not to do it before you don't do it, as opposed to waiting and then feeling the suck and then being like, letting that motivate you maybe next time. So yeah, man, it's good to hear this. How's the podcast going? And I say that because I know there was a little gap there. I don't know if that was like intentional or you're just getting back on the mic. It was an intentional break.
Yeah. So essentially the gap there was, I was going hard at it with not much intention other than I'm going to put out 3 episodes a week and that's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to do, and use it as a way to have long form content, because social media obviously is like the worst place for nuance and context and whatnot. And, hopefully help with the know, like, and trust factor. My job is getting clients and taking them to their goals. An easy way for someone to know, like, and trust me is hearing my voice and talk and whatnot. So I just started doing that and was really, really consistent with it. And then there was a period where things got a lot more inconsistent because I was going through some like mentorship business coaching. And so I was going all in on social media. I was going all in on email. I was going all in on serving my clients, even more so than I was in the past, which is like crazy to think. It's like, how do you even expand on that? And the podcast just took a back seat. And now I'm kind of in a spot where I'm gaining more of a consistent rhythm. And this is one of the things, believe it or not, I don't love everything that I do, but podcasting is one of the few things that I love. Like, I love it. The podcast itself, I'm sure compared to others, it's horrible. If I'm honest with you, I don't even look at the numbers. I have no clue, but I love having conversations, even if it's just with myself. And so for me, it's like, okay, I need to pour into what fills my soul and what gives me joy. And that's the podcast. And so that's the reason that you saw a little bit of a break there. And ideally, it'll maintain consistency again.
Yeah. And I wasn't trying to call you out. It's more of an observation, of totally. Like, I'm wondering. I can relate to so much of that. Yeah. About the podcast and wanting to make it yours and make it kind of serve you and the audience, because that's, we got in this because we love it. We had some personal experience with all of this. And that is how you're going to help people the most, is really tying into that, not just, being a Wikipedia article of information. I say that because the 1-star review I had, the guy called me a Wikipedia article for this one. He said it sounded like I was reading from a Wikipedia, and that's where we get to like the limiting beliefs and the self-doubt. And you're like, well, you've got all these 5-star reviews. What about those? And we do this to ourselves.
Dude, yes, 100%.
And that's part of the mindset. So like, people listening, this is real, right? Like this is real stuff, real life. Yeah. It affects everything.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, please, man.
Jump in there on something?
I've got some other stuff. Please jump in.
No, you're good. One of the things, there was a period at the beginning of this where you asked me a question and I really stumbled because I was like, what was the beginning of his question? I forgot. I should have stopped and asked, but you reminded me as you talked about the negatives. And one of them was the fact that, like you said, we just focus on these negatives. You have all these 5-star reviews. You get that 1 star, you get that one negative comment, that one troll on social media. And you're like, do I actually know what I'm talking about?
I should just quit, man, right now.
Like on paper, I'll quit. Yeah. On paper, you're like, this is user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's a dog cartoon with sunglasses. That's a profile picture, private profile. You're like, on paper, this should not matter, but emotionally, it matters so much.
The most value that I got from this was the fact that I had someone that I could talk to about anything and that there was going to be no judgment. It was just, well, here are your goals. Here's the best way that you're going to achieve it. And then let's work together to help you feel inspired and motivated to do that. And there's a lot of people out there trying to be coaches, and not all of them have done the work. And also just be a genuine person that is positive and coming from the heart in terms of wanting to help. And Philip really embodied all of those qualities. I would recommend him to just about anyone that's looking to achieve goals in that realm of their nutrition and building new habits.
So I heard someone say once, I wish I could remember where I heard it, but our minds kind of focus on the negatives, and they use this illustration where, if you have this bowl of your favorite, what's your favorite ice cream?
Peanut butter cup.
Oh, okay. What brand?
Oh, anything but like I'll go to Dairy Queen or something like that. Like
Reese's peanut butter cups,
like
in there?
a Blizzard or something. Yeah,
dude, me too.
Yeah.
So you have your Reese's peanut butter cup ice cream, right? And then you have a cockroach on top.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that cockroach just touched the top. You're not even focused on the ice cream.
Ruined.
It's ruined, right? But if you have a bowl of cockroaches and one dollop of scoop of your favorite ice cream, cockroaches. That's all you think about, right? And it just kind of illustrates how easy it is for us to focus on the negative. We have to put so much work in to focus on the positives. We have to go out of our way because our default is to focus on the negative. And tying that back into earlier, when I said that I kind of forgot the beginning of your question, when you asked about the practical tips, before getting into the practical tips, one of the most important things is understanding the power of your mind so you can believe that the practical tips will work. And there are a few things that come to mind with this. And there are some papers that have illustrated it, but we all probably understand the placebo and nocebo effect. You give someone a sugar pill, they think it's something, the physiological effects will come into play. You give them a nocebo where it's like you just tell them that something's happening, they believe it. So two great examples. One was like, I don't even know if it's called the milkshake experiment, but that's what it's commonly called, where two groups were given, the same milkshake. And one group, it was told, I use this with my fat loss clients a lot. One group was told it was very calorie dense, satiating, filling milkshake. The other group was told it was a very quote unquote sensible, low calorie milkshake. Well, the group that was told it was a sensible milkshake had far more hunger. They felt deprived and they felt fatigued. Whereas the satiating milkshake group, the ones that were told it was satiating, were like, I'm great. So even when it comes to calories, how we think we're going to feel is often how we feel. There was another one that took two groups of people, one at caloric maintenance, one at caloric deficit, and they did the same thing. Told them, hey, you're in a deficit. Hey, you're not. And the group in a deficit experienced, this group was told they weren't in a deficit, even though they were, experienced less hunger and all that stuff. And then another one that makes me think of the effect is these college-age guys, which is like every study, but they took these college-age guys and then told them that they were taking steroids. And I think I'll have to remember what exercises. I want to say it was leg press, bench, and something else, but increased by 33%. And it was like, it wasn't in a long period of time. Like it was quick. And so our minds are far more powerful than we give them credit for. And so before even going into the practical tips is really just understanding and accepting that, hey, your mind can take you to places that your body thought it could never go. And you need to just train it. And when you accept that's the truth and then go into the practical, you'll move mountains. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is true how powerful it is. And sometimes, like when I think of going to the gym, so I'm recovering from a shoulder surgery last year. It's like almost a year ago, right?
That's a doozy.
Rotator cuff is tough because like you recover, and then there's like these setbacks because you end up pushing too hard and bursitis and all that comes up. So yesterday was the first time I did like just overhead press work in a couple months. Like I had gotten to it and then I had to get off of it to kind of recover and now I got back to it. But my mind was telling me like, there's no way, right? Because, just opening up my arms and trying to press over, there's this little bit of soreness and pain there, right? But it's manageable. And you just have, like you said, you just have to tell yourself, no, this is 100% possible. My trainer said I'm good to go. Like, just do it. And then you realize you do it, right?
Yep.
And it holds us back as much as it could help us move forward. So I think that's the power of it, is like, how much could it give us the power to move forward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I brought the ice cream thing. So it's like that power is going to be there either way. Are you going to let the default override and think about the cockroaches, or are you going to use it to your advantage and think about the ice cream or, whatever the positive outcome is that you're wanting?
So in practical purposes, then, This sounds somewhat tied into when we talk about limiting beliefs on the negative side, right? Like we're telling ourselves things and then we reinforce it in our mind, shifting from that to maybe releasing those and then embracing new beliefs. What is the practical? That's what people want to know. Like, how do I make myself think I'm in a surplus when I'm not, right? Or is that what you said? Like when you're in a deficit and you're not in a deficit because either your weight is going down or you're tracking your food, you're going to know. So, and maybe that's not the example that you're going to be able to apply to yourself, but
totally.
Yeah.
There definitely is an element right there of like, for example, those people being studied were lied to, right? And you can't lie to yourself.
Right.
But that's the point, is like understanding that a lot of how you feel comes from your mind can help you have that positive self-talk. And then that will improve over time, even though you know you're doing it. But as far as a practical, from a food standpoint, and even taking that calorie deficit standpoint, one of my favorite things to go over with people, and I think it's, if I'm being 100% honest with you, a part of the reason the whole notion that, under a certain amount of calories, like the imaginary 1,300 or 1,200 calories is inherently bad, is all over the place, is because, even though it's not scientifically true at all, is because we lack an abundance mindset with food, especially when it comes to a calorie deficit. So when we focus on adding and not taking away, that's huge. So all that means is like you are adding low calorie, nutrient dense foods to your diet, instead of looking at your diet and saying, hey, what are all these quote unquote bad things or hypercaloric things that I need to take away? We say, what am I lacking that I can add? I'm not getting any spinach in. I'm not getting any greens in. Let's add some spinach in there. I'm not getting any fruit in on a regular basis. Let's add some of that in. I'm not getting any fiber, way below the minimum RDA. Like I should be getting more in. Let's add more of that. And what tends to happen is the stuff that is bad or does not align with your goals and what you want out of your nutrition will find its way out. But as you're doing it, you're not doing it from a depravity mindset. You're giving yourself stuff. You're adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. So that is going to help you psychologically. So with a nutritional piece, that one is huge. In terms of the workout piece.
So hold on, before we go there, because there's a few different scenarios I want to break down on that. Fat loss versus when we're talking about getting more protein or whatever. Obviously, it can apply to anything, right? This additive approach. And something just came to mind. Like I'm in a fat loss phase. So, getting the hunger. I know that if I add a huge bowl of strawberries, to whatever I'm eating in the afternoon, even if I have a craving for a granola bar or whatever, adding that in is both going to serve what you said, like the nutrients, and it's going to fill up my stomach. And all of a sudden the rest of the day is hunky dory.
So we're used to that hyper palatable, highly processed diet. And that's just our environment. We're a product of our environment. So it's goes back to the alcohol piece. You just don't know what you don't know. And so once you realize, oh, okay, the way we used to live, and I'm not saying that, we should live like our ancestors did all the time, but like the way we used to live, we had food when we were hungry, and then we had food that was very low in calorie and very satiating, and we had a lot of it. I was reading a few studies a couple of weeks ago. I think that even in modern hunter-gatherer tribes, some of these guys are getting like 80 to 100 grams of fiber a day. It's absurd. But their calories are not crazy at all because it's plants and fruits, veggies all the time. And so you don't know what you don't know. But once you start realizing, oh, okay, if I just pursue more whole, natural, nutrient-dense foods, especially fiber, and I pursue food volume, strawberries, watermelon, whatever, I can have so much food without having tons of calories. I can actually more food volume than I did before when I was eating more calories.
Yeah. Justin Cottle was on the show. I don't know if you've talked to him yet, but you love the guy. He's an anatomist. Like he did cadaver research. He was head of like the human anatomy lab. So he comes from that perspective. And he was
sweet.
He was talking about the gut health in the Hadza tribe and how they like the children have large bellies, but it's not distended from like malnutrition. It's because of all the gas being produced by the gut bacteria from all the fiber they eat.
Interesting.
Right. And because they have such diversity and such a like large microbiome. Anyway, you mentioned that, but they also eat a lot of honey, right? Which is nutrient dense, but it's like a good balanced part of their, calories that they get. Side topic. Keep going, man.
No, you're good. And then I was just going to say with the workout piece, that one's a little harder, right? Because working out is in the moment hard. It's physically exhausting. It's exerting. And this is going to be like someone listening is going to be like, well, duh. But one of the best pieces of advice that I can give to people is what I tell my clients when it comes to progressing and adding the next weight is just try. And who cares if you don't get the reps that you were supposed to? If you don't give yourself that opportunity to stretch yourself, how are you ever going to know what you are capable of? and what you may not be capable of. So instead of wondering, oh, shoot, I only got 10 reps in the leg press with 200 pounds. I don't know if I can go to 210. What is someone going to come up and kill you if you get 8 reps with 210? Go for it, right? So there's an element of creating that self-belief through the reps. And then there's also an element too of exposing your body to that stimulus, because your body will respond. I think that the human body is one of the most profound adaptation machines we've ever seen. And it will respond to whatever it is that you are doing. Do we have physical limitations? Absolutely. We can't turn into the Incredible Hulk. We have a ceiling in some regard, but most of us don't have any understanding of what our ceiling is. I think that if we look at again, another study that I'm not remembering the title of, but if we look at elite powerlifters, right, they supposedly can access upwards of like 96%, 97% of their total strength, whereas the average human being can access maybe 50 to 60%. And so there is an immense amount of untapped potential that your body will let you do or get to if you just give it the opportunity. Just say, hey, body, I need you here. It'll come through for you. So just trying and putting yourself out there, exposing yourself, getting the practice in, getting the reps in, that will also make you more confident with your ability to challenge yourself and push yourself. And so though it won't become physically easier, it'll become mentally easier, and there won't be an obstacle or a hurdle to overcome next time you need to push yourself.
So that's a really good one. And we got to sit on this one for a bit, the just try thing, because in my early days of doing strength training, I did the starting strength program, right? Which is sets across of 5 reps. And you're kind of forced when you do sets across, like you want to get those reps. So it almost like, it kind of pushes you to go past that lizard brain limit, because you're like, I've got to get 5. Like it's not, I don't have 8 to 12 or I'm going for an RPE. But what are your thoughts about newer lifters, especially, or even intermediates who just aren't pushing hard enough? They're not getting anywhere close to failure they think they are. And if you said document your RPE, they'll say 9. You're like, that's a 6. What are your thoughts on all of that? And maybe a simple approach for newer lifters to just get in the mindset of hitting that rep closer to failure, besides just try? Because I love just try. I do. But is there a mechanistic way we could even like mistake proof that early on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of variance with that. But the first thing I would say, Philip, is training in a strength-based rep range. So a rep range that focuses on the adaptation of strength. And so that's low to maybe moderate. This is one of the first times in my life that I realized how strong I could be. Because before I was so obsessed, like I said, with building bigger muscles. And so the thought of like going below 8 reps, I was like, what? Who would do that? That's stupid. And I started getting into deadlifting, and I would do 2 reps and 3 reps. And I was like, whoa, there's a lot here. Like my central nervous system can do a lot that I didn't think it could before. So I would say lowering reps a bit can definitely help, because one thing that I think happens when you have higher, maybe more moderate rep ranges is that you start to feel that burn. You start to feel that metabolic stress, that pump. And that's definitely a level of discomfort, but it's not like mechanical or technical failure of the muscle. Whereas with strength and those lower reps, you don't build up a lot of that metabolic damage. So you don't get that sensation before you physically cannot move anymore. Like you literally cannot get it up. And so I think that's an easy way for you to introduce yourself to what it actually looks like to get to failure. Then once you start to get into those more moderate rep ranges, then you just have to get through the hurdle of like, okay, am I convincing myself that I'm getting to failure because I'm fatigued and I'm feeling that stress and I'm feeling that strain, and so I want to slow down and stop? Or is this an actual, I'm giving every last bit of energy that I possibly can, and the machine or barbell or weight literally is not moving? That's the first thing. The second thing, and I would definitely recommend doing this with machines, not so much with free weights, even if you have a spotter, but intentionally go to failure. Practice it. 100% practice it. Not all the time, but like pick a workout or one exercise each workout. The last set, take it to absolute failure. And then once you think you've reached failure, pause for like 2 seconds and try to do another rep, and then do it again and do it again. Because this is where the mindset, we can use our mind to kind of trick ourselves. And I even catch myself doing this. Is one of the best ways to look at RPE is the velocity that we have in our reps, like how much our reps are slowing down. Because RPE can be a little subjective. It's that feeling. How did I feel? So it's like, well, it was a 9. It's like, well, the speed of your rep from the second rep to the 10th rep was the exact same, but you stopped at 10. So clearly you weren't reaching failure. But if we look at our velocity and our rep is really slowing down and it is like a grind to even move it another inch, then you're really getting to that failure. But you can easily trick yourself, and think, oh man, I'm really tired. And then that, seventh rep is pretty quick. And then that eighth rep all of a sudden just slows down drastically, right? And you're like, okay, I'm convincing myself that I'm fatigued here. But learning to push through that and actually just go through failure, I think is really one of the best learning experiences you can have. Just getting those, pun intended, reps in so you can familiarize yourself with what true failure looks like. So hopefully that's a little bit more practical and helpful than just
great. That's great. And of course, if you have a coach, if you have someone doing form checks, they'll be able to see the speed as well and kind of know what's going on.
Yes. And that's another thing, actually, thank you for actually saying that. Filming yourself is huge because this is someone, I did training in high school for baseball. I did training in college for baseball. Like I've been working out for a very long time. And it wasn't until I was able to film myself more in the gym, I would say in the first few years of me personal training, that I was actually able to see how I was pushing myself in ways that were maybe too much because my form got way too sloppy, or not at all, right? Because I was stopping because of the burn or whatever, or I was psyching myself out. Filming yourself really is a great way for you to remove yourself from the first person and look at it from the third person. And it helps, at least in my opinion, it helps you look at what you're doing more objectively. It doesn't matter if you have a coach, to look at it. You look at how you're doing and how you're performing that set. And that's really going to give you a lot of insight that I almost guarantee you did not pick up on when you were in first person mode going through it yourself.
100%. I think that works for anything visual, even like public speaking, anything, just videoing yourself. And one last thing with failure, I just realized, like people have been talking about lengthened partials a lot. There's this movement of lengthened partial finishers. And I was thinking when you were talking about going to failure, like if you were to think, okay, my set is going to have lengthened partial finishers at the end, you wouldn't want to start those while you still have gas in the tank to finish full reps. So that might also create an interesting mental position of like, I'm going to do the lengthens, but no, wait, I could do a full rep again and kind of bridge that gap.
100%. No, absolutely. Yeah. There are so many things to consider there. And the lengthened partial thing is, I think, just yet another example of missing the forest for the trees. I think, could it have its time and its place? Absolutely. I've never programmed that in for a client. I would probably never program that in for myself, because for me, it's, if I can get to a point where I can put more weight on for the last set and do lengthened partials, like you said, does that mean that I left stuff on the table during the second set and during the first set? And for me, and I think it should be for anybody, if you're progressing your workouts and you're tracking them, you really want to look at how you compare from set one of one exercise to the next day or the next time you do the workout to that set one. You could compare set two to set two and set three to set three if you want to, but you're in a fatigued state. So it's a little harder to assess and judge progress. So for me, if I would rather spend my time and energy trying to figure out how to maximize set one and then increase that in the next workout, rather than thinking, okay, let's go ahead and just absolutely trash my hamstrings on set three, third set, and add more weight, even though I probably could have done more before that. So if you're already doing that stuff and you want to just crank it out just to see what happens and you've got everything else dialed in, go nuts. But I mean, hey, Philip, most people aren't even writing down their
reps.
The
basics down.
Yeah. They're not writing down. They're not writing down their reps, their weight, their exercises. They're even switching workouts every, few weeks, which I think can be even too early sometimes. Sometimes they're even doing a new workout every day. And so it's like, how do you know you're progressing? And so, yeah, anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent.
And it's easy to take this stuff for granted, right? Even though you see clients constantly come in that don't even know the basics and you have to re-educate them, but then you're like, doesn't everybody know this stuff?
Sure. But if it makes anybody listening feel better, like I kid you not, I would ever see myself programming that in my workout. It's just like, why am I going to spend my mental energy doing that for something that maybe gets less than a percentage of growth, anyway. So.
Yeah, I guess the last topic, because there were a lot of things we could talk about with mindset. I wanted to talk about like this diet we have of information, right? Like, I've been thinking about this a lot because, I have a friend that does a podcast about how you shouldn't binge podcasts, right? You should listen mindfully and take action. And I heard another guy, a podcast, which I listen to those. I listen to a lot. And he's like, stop listening at 1.5 speed. If you're doing that, why are you even listening? Like, you're just trying to cram in more information rather than just absorb it. And then there's just the sheer quantity. If you're on Instagram and Twitter and Threads and Facebook, which a lot of people are on like 8 social media platforms, it's just like bombarding you. How do we deal with all that? Like, that's a big question. It's a big loaded question, but it does affect your mind, and it affects like you taking action, sometimes not taking action because you're just like, I don't even know where to go.
Yeah,
I don't know what
100%.
to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, we definitely live in a consumeristic culture and mindset, not even in the sense of like materialism, but information too. All we do is consume. I even think about it at church sometimes. Sometimes I catch myself being like, oh, I wish so-and-so was speaking, because I think I enjoy it more. It's like, what, am I here to consume or am I here to like serve? What's the deal? And so we can easily do that with podcasts, with social media, with whatever it is. And so one thing that came to mind as you were going through that, Philip, was like intention. I felt like that's the word that came to me. What's the intention, us getting on social media and consuming a certain type of content? What is the intention of tuning into a podcast? Am I here to fill space, or am I here to learn a specific thing? And so I think one thing that is extremely helpful is understanding what you are trying to learn at this current time. One thing, and make it very specific. Not, hey, how can I improve my nutrition? Like one specific thing, meal planning. I want to learn everything that I possibly can about meal planning. And these are the questions that I have about meal planning, right? How do people that are so busy fit it in? How do you time block time to do that? How do you grocery shop for that? I think actually at the very worst, thinking through those questions, but at least, or at the very best, writing them down and then using those platforms or those long form, podcasts, whatever, to get those answers. But I think what happens oftentimes is we just open up the screen with no intention and we just consume and consume and consume. And so we're just left with this paralysis by analysis, and we're left with this doubt, and we're left with, well, so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that, so-and-so said that. I mean, heck, that's one of the reasons most of my clients come in. They're like, I just need to clear the noise and I need someone to tell me what to do because all this is too much to take in and I'm constantly doubting myself. So anyway, figuring out what the intention is and what you're trying to learn. And I would do that for a period of time. Make a week about one thing or a month about one thing. When you look at people who do really well in life, they take time to master and focus on one thing really, really well, right? They're not people who are jumping from this to that, this thing and that thing and whatever. It would be weird if you saw a professional baseball player going through their practice routine and for 10 minutes they practice basketball, for 10 minutes they practice football, for 10 minutes they practice hitting, for 10 minutes they practice pitching. Like, what are you doing, right? If you're a pitcher, practice pitching. So same thing. We want to get very specific with what it is we're trying to learn and pursue that intentionally. And then once you're done, you've written down what you want to do, throw it away, and then apply it. And then rinse and repeat. But the problem is we consume, we get it in our mind, and then before we have a chance to process and think, we shove the next thing in there. And then we shove the next thing in there over and over. And so stuff starts to slip out. So practically speaking, that's what I do. So I will get a book that physically, I can't listen to it, 1.5 times speed. I can't, change my reading speed. People say you can't. I haven't tried. But it slows me down is the point. I have a pen. I circle, I underline, I bookmark things. And then I go back and I think, what was I originally reading this book for? And what things did I save help me with that? And then how can I go apply that into my life? And then for a period of time, might be a few days, it might be a week, it might be 6 months, I apply those things into my life. And then I will go on to the next thing if I feel the need, or I will revisit that same thing if I feel like those answers still aren't there. So I don't know if that helps at all or clarifies.
It helps a lot. I mean, it explains you in a sense from what you're saying. In fact, going back to talking about being obsessed about something and obsessed in a positive way, like putting all your energy into one thing because we're so distracted. And I think back to I used to play saxophone a lot, and actually I want to pick it up more frequently than I do. It's one of those things, I got to be intentional about it. But, you've always heard it takes 10,000 hours to master an instrument, and you have to just constantly apply yourself. And fitness is the same way, but also information. Before we go on to this, you mentioned note-taking in the books. Have you heard of the book, The Well-Educated Mind? It's by Susan Wise Bauer, and she's actually in the homeschool community because we homeschool our kids.
Oh, cool.
And she wrote a book for mothers to use as curriculum that we've been following for years.
Oh,
but she
sweet.
wrote a book for adults on how to do what they used to do, which is actually dissect the book like a classic and go through it multiple times in an organized, hierarchical way. So you might find that interesting as a method or tool.
I'm absolutely going to add that to the list. 100%.
The Well-Educated Mind.
Okay. That's a good one.
Yeah. Anyway, so when people are doing all this with podcasts, like I say podcasts, but it could be anything else, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, how would you say you apply that to that? Because I see definitely how it applies to books, podcasts. You ask questions, you dig down into a topic, you seek it out, you start to like find the fluff and the nonsense, and you jettison that, and it converges, right? Like I've been through that myself with fitness. Like I knew all the nonsense 5 years ago, and now I know a little bit less nonsense. So I'm a little bit more educated.
Exactly.
Or I can spot it. Let's just put it that way. But like, I feel like social media is kind of nefarious just in its own, by definition, in that there's, you're the product and they're trying to give you ads, and that's the whole point of it. How would you use Instagram, for example, to do this?
Yeah. So this one's tough for sure, because you can't change the way it works, right? It is in and of itself a short form, quick, fix dopamine hit. So you can't change the nature of social media. This kind of goes into the internal and external locus of control. Can't change the nature of social media. That would be ridiculous. But you can adopt an internal locus of control and change the way that you use the social media or the way that you respond to it. So one of the things that comes to mind, and the first thing I thought of, is utilizing that saved feature. Okay. Now you still have to go a step further than that, right? So for me, I have a lot of different folders in there, right? So I have folders on business. I have folders on nutrition. I have folders on coaching and training concepts. I have a hilarious, funny folder. I'll have a Kaylee folder where I'm like, she'll think this is funny, and I'll show her, but those folders don't mean anything if you don't go through them. And so what I would say is save stuff that is truly important to you, and then set aside some dedicated time to go through that folder and say, okay, is this something that I really cared about? Because sometimes in that moment, you're like, well, I'll save this recipe. I'm for sure going to make that. And you're like, oh, I saved it 2 years ago. Clearly, you don't think you didn't need it, so you can throw it away. But if there's stuff where it's like, oh yeah, this was profound, then you can actually figure out how to apply that into your life. I think that's one way you can use social media. Another way is obviously filtering. If there are people that you follow that you haven't applied a single piece of advice from, unfollow them. I don't care how good their advice is on social media. You didn't do anything with it. It would be far better for you to take the mediocre advice that you constantly apply and keep pursuing that than to take the great advice that you never apply. So unfollow people. I do that all the time. I'll go through and be like, who have I not seen anything from? Who do I not listen to? Who is just a kind of a piece of flash with information, but I haven't utilized any of it? Unfollow. And so that's what I would recommend there as well. And then in terms of the actual platforms themselves, I would honestly, actually, now that I think of it, if you find yourself not using social media for the things that you claim you're using it for, like learning things and getting information, maybe just make social media purely about entertainment and go to podcasts for fitness, go to books for fitness, go to longer YouTube videos for fitness, whatever it is. And maybe just use social media purely for entertainment. That's maybe another solution. Again, not a social media expert, but that's one thing that comes to mind. So I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know what you would add to that.
Yeah. No, I'm giving you the space here. Don't put me on the spot. No, but seriously, for me, I do like the idea that platforms have a purpose, and maybe we're trying to shoehorn it into the wrong thing. Because I personally, I don't know how much I learn from IG, except occasionally I'll see some gold come out in a video where somebody's really taken the time to give some value. You know what I mean? And that's the difference between people who are just cranking out viral stuff versus, they really are trying to help with their message, even though they're also trying to get followers. And like you said, you could save it or learn from it.
It's very rare. I would agree. I can't even think of off the top of my head. I'm sure if I went through it, I could, but I can't think off the top of my head the last time that I saw a post or a reel where I was like, holy smokes, this is life-changing. This, I changed everything in my business or everything in my marriage or everything, whatever, because of this. What actually ends up happening is I'll see something, I like it, go to the profile, go to their other stuff. And then that's where stuff comes in, and I always tell people all the time, you usually say something like this, where it's like, man, there's just all this information out there and I'm in the same spot. And sometimes I'm like, do you really think everybody's free information is going to help you as much as their coaching or their long form content or whatever? No, it's not going to. So yes, utilize it if it helps, for sure, but go into the rabbit hole a little bit and don't be afraid to do it. Utilize something that is maybe paid. It costs you $20 for an ebook, but at least you can go all the way through it and read it and actually take something versus just scrolling on to the next reel. Because that's another thing that's kind of unhelpful with the reels or the posts, is that we don't have enough time to digest and process what we just consumed. It's on to the next thing. I guarantee you, if I were to scroll right now for 5 minutes and you were to ask me what I watched, I would probably remember the one funny video that I died laughing and saved it. And I would not remember anything else, no matter how profound I thought it was in that moment. So yeah, anyway.
It's so true. It's so true. Some of my favorite followers on the short form platforms are the ones who listen to my podcast. It's
Totally.
That's where they know me.
Right.
And you're right.
Totally.
You're right. So, and obviously people are listening to this show too, and they can follow your stuff. And you've got some, maybe I don't know if they're life changing, but hey, I referenced one in here about the contrasting, which is a
You did.
actionable,
It means
thing.
something.
And just so the listener knows, one of our longtime listeners and former client of mine, follows Adam and was touched by a few of his posts in terms of actually taking action. And he's an action taker. So that's
I
what you
love
got to
that.
be too. Anyway. All right, man. So we've covered a lot here. I'm sure there's a million other things we can get into, but I do like to ask this question of guests. And that is there anything you wish I had asked in this whole conversation that I didn't? And if so, what would be your answer?
Man, that is a great question. Is there anything that I wish you asked? Honestly, there's nothing that comes to mind. We got into a lot. We got into the mindset piece. I got to share a little bit about my faith. I got to share some vulnerable things about where I'm at with working out and training, and I've loved it. So there's nothing that comes to mind.
Yeah, likewise, man. It was a lot of fun, supernatural. Yeah, we're on the same page. And
Yeah.
we all have different perspectives and backgrounds, but it's man, we're just trying to get this done. And everybody listening, just change your lives. I mean, if you do something you learned today, do it. Adam's suggesting rewind, go back, find some of those excellent quotes like the one he just said, which was if you take action on mediocre advice, it's going to be better than not taking action on the best advice. Very important statement right there. It doesn't have to be perfect. So, all right, where can listeners learn more about you, Adam?
Yeah. So y'all listeners, you can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active. And it's just my first name, last name. Poehlmann is Poehlmann. And the German relatives really gave me a hard time with that one. And
it's a little tricky, yeah, but you get it.
A little bit, but that's okay. And then obviously the fitness show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then you can find me on Threads too. Same Adam Poehlmann. That's by far where I am the most active. And if you're someone who is a gym goer and wants to drop 10 plus pounds without strict dieting and you want some more in-depth stuff, I've got a free Facebook group called the Transformation Tribe where I put out live workshops and put out some more in-depth content that goes a little bit deeper than the surface level stuff you might see on social media. So that's where y'all can find me if you want to.
And Adam's a master at using these platforms the way they're intended. So on Threads is great just for the quick tips, and here's how you do it. Take action. It kind of cuts out all the distractions and the video and images and all that. And then the Facebook group. Yeah, I think Facebook groups like that can be awesome for just getting in that community and that relatedness and finding other people who can motivate you and help you get there. So check all that out. I'll throw it in the show notes. It's been an awesome conversation, Adam. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, Philip. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Wits and Weights. If you found value in today's episode and know someone else who's looking to level up their wits or weights, please take a moment to share this episode with them. And make sure to hit the follow button in your podcast platform right now to catch the next episode. Until then, stay strong.